My name is Savannah Pierce. I'm 28, and I just discovered that my entire family has been living a lie for the past decade. What started as a casual phone call about Thanksgiving dinner plans turned into the most devastating revelation of my life, exposing a web of manipulation and betrayal that would ultimately lead to the most satisfying revenge I never saw coming. When my sister smugly told me our family's holiday was for winners only, she had no idea she was about to lose everything she thought made her untouchable. Before we dive into this wild journey of family vengeance and long overdue justice, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Drop your location in the comments below and smash that like button if you're ready for a story that'll make you question everything you thought you knew about family loyalty. Don't forget to subscribe, because this tale of Thanksgiving betrayal is just getting started, and trust me, you won't want to miss what happens next. Growing up in suburban Denver, Colorado, I always believed I was part of the perfect American family. My parents, Robert and Linda Pierce, owned a successful chain of sporting goods stores across the Rocky Mountain region. My older sister, Madison, 31, was the golden child who seemed to excel at everything she touched. She graduated valedictorian from high school, earned a full scholarship to Northwestern University, and landed a prestigious job at a Fortune 500 consulting firm in Chicago right after graduation. Meanwhile, I took a different path. After high school, I struggled to find my direction. I bounced between community college classes, worked various retail jobs, and eventually found my passion in graphic design. It took me 6 years to complete my bachelor's degree while working full-time, but I was proud of my journey. I started my own freelance design business 3 years ago, and while it wasn't making me rich, I was building something meaningful and slowly gaining recognition in the Denver creative community. Every family gathering, Madison would regale everyone with stories of her corporate successes, her 6-figure salary, and her picture-perfect relationship with her fiancé Trevor, who worked in investment banking. She lived in a stunning downtown Chicago high-rise, drove a BMW, and always showed up to family events wearing designer clothes and expensive jewelry. My parents beamed with pride whenever she spoke, hanging on her every word like she was delivering gospel. I tried not to let the constant comparisons bother me. When relatives asked about my little art hobby, I'd smile and change the subject. When Madison would make subtle digs about my unconventional lifestyle or my studio apartment in the arts district, I bit my tongue. I told myself that family was family and everyone had different definitions of success. The dynamic became more pronounced over the years. Madison's visits home were treated like royal occasions. Mom would spend days preparing elaborate meals, Dad would clear his schedule, and they'd hang on her every word about corporate politics and luxury vacations. My accomplishments: landing my first major client, having my work featured in a local magazine, winning a design competition, were met with polite nods and quick subject changes. Last Thanksgiving was particularly difficult. Madison announced her engagement to Trevor with a ring that probably cost more than my annual rent. The entire evening revolved around wedding planning, venue discussions, and guest lists. When I tried to share that I just signed my biggest client yet, a local brewery that wanted me to redesign their entire brand, Madison literally interrupted me to show everyone photos of potential wedding dresses on her phone. I started noticing patterns in how family conversations flowed. Every topic somehow circled back to Madison's achievements or future plans. When I suggested family activities during holidays, they were often dismissed in favor of whatever Madison wanted to do. Phone calls from my parents became less frequent, usually only happening when they needed something or when Madison had prompted them to check in on me. The subtle exclusion became more obvious over time. Family photos for Christmas cards were scheduled around Madison's availability, even if it meant I couldn't attend. Important family decisions were made in group texts that somehow I wasn't included in. Birthday celebrations for my parents became elaborate affairs when Madison could attend, but low-key dinners when it was just me. I started therapy last year, partly to deal with these family dynamics. My therapist helped me recognize that I'd been accepting crumbs of attention and affection while watching my sister receive a feast. She encouraged me to set boundaries and advocate for myself more strongly within my family structure. But nothing could have prepared me for the phone call that would change everything. 3 weeks before this year's Thanksgiving, I called my mom to ask about dinner plans and what I could bring. The silence on the other end of the line lasted so long I thought the call had dropped. "Oh, honey," my mom finally said, her voice carrying a tone I'd never heard before, a mixture of guilt and something that sounded almost like pity. "We didn't. Well, Madison thought it would be better if this year's Thanksgiving was kept small. Just immediate family who are really established in their lives." The words hit me like a physical blow. "I'm sorry, what do you mean by immediate family? I'm your daughter." There was another long pause and I could hear muffled conversation in the background. My dad was saying something, but I couldn't make out the words. When my mom came back on the line, her voice was strained. "Madison is flying in with Trevor and they have some important announcements to make. She feels like this year should be focused on celebrating real achievements and life milestones. She's concerned that having too many people might dilute the significance of their news." I felt like I was having an out-of-body experience. "Mom, are you seriously telling me that I'm not invited to Thanksgiving because Madison doesn't think I'm successful enough?" "It's not like that, Savannah. You know Madison doesn't mean anything personal by it. She just thinks that family celebrations should highlight positive examples and inspire everyone to strive for more. Maybe next year, when your business is more established." I hung up without saying goodbye. My hands were shaking so hard, I could barely hold the phone. 28 years of subtle put-downs and comparisons had led to this moment. Being explicitly excluded from my own family's holiday celebration because I wasn't deemed worthy enough. I called Madison directly, hoping there had been some misunderstanding. She answered on the third ring and I could hear the sounds of a busy restaurant in the background. "Savannah, Mom said she talked to you. I hope you understand that this isn't personal. Trevor and I are announcing our wedding date and some other major life changes, and we really wanted this Thanksgiving to be focused on forward momentum and success stories. You know how family gatherings can get when there are too many different energy levels in the room." "Energy levels," I repeated, incredulous. "Madison, what are you actually saying? Look, I love you, but let's be honest about where you are in life right now. You're almost 30, living in a tiny apartment, running a small-time design business that barely pays your bills. Trevor's parents are going to be there, and first impressions matter. This dinner is really important for our future, and I need everyone there to represent the kind of family values and success that align with our goals. So, I'm an embarrassment to you." "That's not what I said. I'm just saying that maybe you could use this time to really focus on getting your life together. Use it as motivation. When you're in a better place, you'll totally be included in these kinds of celebrations again." The casual cruelty in her voice was breathtaking. "Madison, I can't believe you convinced our parents to exclude me from Thanksgiving. I didn't have to convince them of anything. They see the same things I see. They want what's best for everyone. And sometimes that means making tough decisions. This is really about creating the right environment for important family announcements." What announcements could possibly be so important that they require excluding your sister Madison's voice took on a smug tone that I'd heard countless times before. Well, since you asked, Trevor got promoted to senior partner at his firm, we're moving to New York and we're buying a penthouse in Manhattan. Oh, and we're pregnant. So yeah, this Thanksgiving is definitely for winners only. She said those last words with such casual viciousness that I actually gasped. Winners only, I mean people who are actually accomplishing things with their lives, people who are building something meaningful. You understand. I hung up and immediately called my parents back. My dad answered this time and his voice was defensive before I even spoke. Savannah, your mother explained the situation. Madison has some very important news to share, and she wants this gathering to be special. We hope you'll understand, and maybe use this time for some self-reflection. Dad, I'm your daughter. I've never missed a family holiday. How can you possibly think this is okay? Sometimes tough love is necessary. Madison is setting a good example of what success looks like, and maybe being excluded from this will motivate you to make some changes in your life. We're not getting any younger, and we want to see you settled and secure before. Before what? There was a long silence. Before we start making decisions about the future. About inheritances and family business succession. Madison has proven she can handle responsibility. The implication was clear. This wasn't just about one Thanksgiving dinner. This was about my entire future in the family. I was being systematically excluded from not just holiday celebrations but from any meaningful role in my family's legacy. After hanging up with my father, I sat in my apartment feeling completely hollowed out. The casual way my family had dismissed me, the calculated cruelty of Madison's winners, only comment, and the implication that my worthiness as a family member was tied to some arbitrary definition of success. It was all too much to process. But as the initial shock wore off, something else began to take its place. A burning need to understand how this had happened. How had my family become so toxic without me realizing it? More importantly, how had Madison gained so much influence over my parents' decisions? I started by going through old family photos and text messages, looking for patterns I might have missed. What I found was disturbing. Over the past 3 years, Madison had systematically positioned herself as the family's success story while subtly undermining my achievements. She'd frame my accomplishments in diminishing ways during family conversations, always followed by her own bigger and better news. But something felt off about her perfect life narrative. Having worked in design and marketing, I'd developed a keen eye for things that seemed too polished, too perfectly curated. Madison's social media presence, her stories about work, even her relationship with Trevor. Everything felt like a carefully constructed brand rather than authentic life experiences. I decided to do some digging. Madison had always been vague about the specifics of her job, using lots of corporate buzzwords, but never really explaining what she actually did day to day. Her LinkedIn profile was impressive but generic. She worked for Pinnacle Strategic Solutions in Chicago, but when I searched for the company, their website was surprisingly sparse for such a supposedly prestigious firm. My curiosity was fully activated now. I reached out to a college friend who worked in consulting in Chicago, asking if she'd heard of Pinnacle Strategic Solutions or knew anyone who worked there. Her response was immediate and concerning. Never heard of them, and I know pretty much every major consulting firm in the city. Are you sure that's the right name? I spent the next several days doing deep research online. Pinnacle Strategic Solutions did exist, but barely. They had a generic website with stock photos and vague service descriptions. No employee directory, no case studies, no real evidence of actual business operations. Their office address led to a small shared workspace building in a less prestigious part of Chicago. Then I started looking into Trevor. Madison had always described him as an investment banker, but his LinkedIn profile was equally vague. He worked for Metropolitan Investment Group, another company that seemed to exist more in theory than in practice. Their website looked like it had been built with a cheap template, and there were no news articles or industry mentions that I could find. The more I dug, the more suspicious everything became. I found myself falling down rabbit holes of corporate registration databases and business filing records. What I discovered was shocking. Both Pinnacle Strategic Solutions and Metropolitan Investment Group were essentially shell companies. They existed on paper but had minimal actual business activity. My hands were shaking as I pieced together what this might mean. If Madison and Trevor weren't who they claimed to be professionally, what else were they lying about? I thought about all the expensive gifts, the luxury lifestyle, the designer clothes and fancy vacations. Where was the money actually coming from? I remembered that Madison had mentioned something about Trevor's family being wealthy, but she'd always been vague about details. I started searching for information about Trevor's background, using the limited personal details I'd gathered from family conversations over the years. What I found made my blood run cold. Trevor Richardson, if that was even his real name, had a criminal record. Nothing violent, but a pattern of financial fraud and identity theft dating back several years. The most recent charges had been dropped due to technicalities, but the pattern was clear. I sat staring at my laptop screen, trying to process what I'd uncovered. My sister, the golden child who had convinced my parents to exclude me from Thanksgiving because I wasn't successful enough, appeared to be living a completely fabricated life with a man who was likely a criminal. But I needed more proof before I could take action. I couldn't just show up to my family with internet search results and expect them to believe me over their precious Madison. I needed concrete evidence that would be impossible to deny. That's when I remembered something. Last Christmas, Madison had left her laptop open in my parents' living room while she went to take a phone call. I'd noticed she was logged into several financial accounts, but I hadn't thought much of it at the time. Now I wondered what other digital breadcrumbs might be available if I knew where to look. I started thinking about this more strategically. I had skills that Madison didn't know about, skills I'd developed through my design work that involved understanding online systems, digital forensics for client projects, and research methodologies. If Madison was running some kind of long-term deception, there would be evidence. I just had to be smart about finding it. The plan that began forming in my mind was audacious, but the anger and hurt I felt was propelling me forward. If my family wanted to exclude me because I wasn't successful enough, I was going to show them exactly what their golden child had been hiding. And if Madison wanted to play games about who deserved to be at the family table, I was going to flip that table entirely. I had 3 weeks until Thanksgiving. 3 weeks to gather enough evidence to expose whatever scam Madison and Trevor were running. 3 weeks to prepare the most devastating revelation my family had ever experienced. 3 weeks to prove that sometimes the biggest loser in the family is actually the only one telling the truth. The investigation was about to begin, and I had a feeling that by Thanksgiving dinner, Madison's definition of winners only was going to have a very different meaning. The next 2 weeks became a masterclass in digital detective work. I threw myself into investigating Madison and Trevor with the same intensity I'd once reserved for my most challenging design projects. What started as hurt and anger had transformed into methodical determination to uncover the truth. My first breakthrough came when I managed to find Trevor's real name through cross-referencing arrest records with the photos Madison had posted on social media. Trevor Richardson was actually Tyler Hoffman, and his criminal history was far more extensive than my initial searches had revealed. He'd been involved in several elaborate financial scams over the past 5 years, targeting wealthy families and individuals through fake investment opportunities and romance schemes. But the really disturbing discovery came when I dug deeper into how he'd met Madison. According to public records and court documents I found through legal databases, Tyler had specifically targeted young women from affluent families, researching their backgrounds through social media before approaching them with his fake identity and career credentials. Madison hadn't fallen in love with a successful investment banker. She'd been deliberately selected and manipulated by a professional con artist who had studied our family's dynamics and financial situation before making his move. The realization made me sick to my stomach, but it also explained so much about their relationship timeline and how quickly Tyler had been integrated into our family gatherings. I discovered that Pinnacle Strategic Solutions was more than just a fake company. It was part of an elaborate network of shell businesses that Tyler used to create the appearance of legitimate income. Bank records that I found through creative online searching showed patterns of money movement that looked suspiciously like money laundering operations. But here's where the story took an even darker turn. Madison wasn't just Tyler's victim. She was his accomplice. Credit card records and financial documents that I managed to piece together through various public record searches showed that Madison had been actively participating in several of Tyler's schemes. She'd used her position at what appeared to be a legitimate job to gain access to client information, which was then used to target wealthy individuals for investment fraud. The expensive lifestyle, the designer clothes, the luxury vacations, it was all funded through elaborate financial crimes that Madison was not only aware of, but actively facilitating. She'd become so invested in maintaining her image as the successful daughter that she'd crossed over into criminal activity to sustain the lie. I found evidence of at least 6 different families who had been defrauded by Madison and Tyler's operation over the past 2 years. The amounts were staggering. Hundreds of thousands of dollars in fake investment schemes, fraudulent consulting contracts, and identity theft. They were running a sophisticated operation that relied on Madison's clean background and family connections to establish credibility with potential marks. The pregnancy announcement that Madison was planning to make at Thanksgiving. According to medical records I found through a database search, she wasn't pregnant. She'd been faking the pregnancy for months, even going so far as to schedule fake doctor's appointments and create false ultrasound images. This was apparently part of a longer-term plan to extract money from our parents for baby expenses and to create additional emotional leverage for bigger financial requests. My investigation also revealed that Madison and Tyler had been researching our family's financial situation far more thoroughly than I'd ever realized. They had detailed information about my parents' business assets, property values, and investment portfolios. They knew exactly how much money was potentially available, and they'd been systematically positioning themselves to gain access to as much of it as possible. The plan was becoming clear: isolate me from the family, establish themselves as the only successful and responsible children, extract as much money as possible through various schemes and fake emergencies, and then disappear before anyone discovered the truth. My exclusion from Thanksgiving wasn't just about Madison's ego. It was a strategic move to prevent anyone from asking uncomfortable questions or providing alternative perspectives on their stories. But the most devastating discovery came when I found evidence that they'd been actively sabotaging my relationship with my parents for over a year. I found emails between Madison and our parents, where she'd been systematically undermining my credibility, questioning my financial stability, and suggesting that I was becoming unstable and potentially dangerous to the family's reputation. She'd been feeding my parents a steady stream of lies about my supposed emotional problems, financial irresponsibility, and concerning behavior. She'd convinced them that my freelance business was actually a cover for financial desperation, and that I'd been considering asking them for money that I couldn't repay. None of it was true, but Madison had been so strategic about how she presented these concerns that my parents had genuinely started to believe that I was becoming a liability rather than a daughter who deserved their love and support. My exclusion from Thanksgiving wasn't just about making room for their fake announcements. It was about permanently severing my relationship with my family so they could have unrestricted access to whatever resources they wanted to steal. The rage I felt was unlike anything I'd ever experienced. Madison hadn't just been selfish or competitive, she'd been actively destroying my family relationships as part of a criminal conspiracy. She'd weaponized my parents' love and pride against me while systematically stealing from them and planning to disappear with everything she could take. But now I had evidence. Detailed, documented, undeniable evidence of everything they'd been doing. Financial records, communication logs, court documents, medical records, business registration, information. I had built a comprehensive case that would not only expose their crimes, but provide law enforcement with everything they needed to prosecute them. The question now was how to use this information most effectively. I could go to the police immediately, but I realized there was a more poetic form of justice available. Madison had planned to use Thanksgiving dinner as the stage for her greatest performance, announcing fake pregnancy news and manipulating my parents into whatever financial commitment she had planned next. Instead, Thanksgiving was going to become the stage for the most devastating exposure of her entire operation. I was going to give my family the truth they deserved, and I was going to watch Madison's carefully constructed world collapse in real time. With all the evidence compiled, I spent the final week before Thanksgiving crafting what I can only describe as the most satisfying plan for justice I've ever conceived. Madison wanted Thanksgiving to be for winners only perfect. I was about to show everyone who the real winner was. First, I contacted the FBI's Financial Crimes Division and provided them with all the evidence I'd gathered about Madison and Tyler's fraud operation. Agent Sarah Martinez was assigned to the case, and she was as outraged as I was about the scope of their crimes. We arranged for agents to be positioned near my parents' house on Thanksgiving Day, ready to make arrests once Madison and Tyler arrived and confirmed their identities. But I didn't want them arrested before dinner. I wanted my parents to hear the truth directly from me, to understand exactly how they'd been manipulated, and to witness Madison's reaction when her world came crashing down. Agent Martinez agreed to coordinate the timing so that law enforcement would move in after I'd had the chance to present my evidence to the family. Next, I reached out to the victims of Madison and Tyler's previous scams. 3 families agreed to provide victim impact statements that I could share with my parents, along with photos and documentation of how Madison and Tyler had deceived them. These weren't abstract crimes. They were real people whose lives had been devastated by my sister's greed and manipulation. I also prepared a comprehensive presentation of all the evidence I'd gathered, organized chronologically, to show exactly how Madison had been lying to our family for years. Financial records, court documents, communication logs, medical records proving the fake pregnancy. Everything was compiled into a clear, undeniable narrative of deception and betrayal. But the most important part of my plan was what I was going to bring to dinner. Remember how Madison had excluded me because I wasn't successful enough? I'd actually been hiding some significant news about my business that I'd been planning to share at Thanksgiving before all this drama started. 2 months ago, my design work had caught the attention of a major national corporation. After a lengthy negotiation process, they'd offered me a contract worth $300,000 to redesign their entire brand identity across multiple product lines. The contract also included a potential ongoing partnership that could be worth over $1 million in additional revenue over the next 3 years. I'd been keeping this news quiet because I wanted to surprise my family and because I'd learned to be cautious about sharing good news that Madison might try to overshadow or diminish. Now, this information was going to serve a very different purpose. I'd also been approached by a publishing company who wanted to feature my work in a book about innovative American designers. The book deal included a significant advance and would establish me as a recognized expert in my field. Again, I'd been saving this news for the right moment to share with my family. So, while Madison had been planning to announce her fake pregnancy and manipulate my parents into giving her money for imaginary baby expenses, I was going to reveal that their unsuccessful daughter had actually achieved more legitimate success than their golden child had ever dreamed of. The irony was perfect. Madison had excluded me from Thanksgiving because she thought I was a failure, not knowing that I'd actually become more successful than she'd ever been. And unlike her, I'd achieved that success honestly. On Thanksgiving morning, I drove to my parents' house uninvited. I'd prepared for the possibility that they might not let me in, but I was counting on their basic decency and curiosity to give me a hearing. I also knew that once I started revealing what I'd discovered, they wouldn't be able to resist hearing more. I arrived at 2 p.m. just as Madison and Tyler were scheduled to make their grand entrance. My parents answered the door, looking uncomfortable and surprised, but I could see the conflict in their eyes. Despite everything Madison had told them about me, I was still their daughter, and showing up on Thanksgiving created a moral dilemma they couldn't easily dismiss. "Savannah, we told you that this year was going to be different," my mother said, but her voice lacked conviction. "I know what you told me, Mom, but I have some things you need to hear before Madison arrives. Things about your golden child that are going to change everything you think you know about this family." My father stepped forward, his expression stern. "Madison warned us that you might try something like this. She said you've been having some emotional difficulties and might try to create drama or spread lies about her success because you're jealous." I smiled, pulling out my phone to show them the first piece of evidence. "Dad, Madison's boyfriend's real name is Tyler Hoffman, and he's a convicted fraud specialist who specifically targets wealthy families. Madison isn't pregnant, she doesn't work for a real company, and they've been stealing money from families just like ours for the past 3 years. The expression on my parents' faces was worth every moment of pain and exclusion I'd experienced over the past month. Confusion, disbelief, and the first flicker of doubt about everything they thought they knew. I have bank records, court documents, medical records, and FBI evidence files. I've been investigating them for 3 weeks, and I've compiled enough evidence to send them both to prison for financial fraud, identity theft, and conspiracy. The FBI is going to arrest them today, but first I wanted you to understand exactly how you've been manipulated." My mother sat down heavily in her chair. "Savannah, this can't be true." "It's all true, Mom. And there's more. Madison has been systematically lying to you about me for over a year, trying to turn you against me, so you wouldn't ask questions about her lifestyle or notice inconsistencies in her stories. She's been planning to steal from you, and excluding me from Thanksgiving was part of that plan. Just then we heard Madison's car pulling into the driveway. Tyler's BMW, which I now knew was leased under a fake identity with fraudulent credit applications, looked as impressive as ever. But everything was about to change. "They're here," I said, looking at my parents' shocked faces. "Are you ready to meet the real Madison?" Madison and Tyler walked through the front door with their usual confidence. Madison practically glowing with anticipation for what she thought would be her greatest performance yet. She was carrying a gift bag that probably contained fake ultrasound photos and a carefully crafted story about needing financial support for the baby. "Surprise," she announced, then stopped abruptly when she saw me sitting in the living room. "What is she doing here?" "Hello, Madison," I said calmly. "Or should I say hello to the masterful criminal who's been systematically defrauding our family for 3 years?" Tyler's face went pale immediately, but Madison laughed. "Mom, Dad, I told you she might try something like this. She's obviously having some kind of mental breakdown because she can't handle being excluded from family events." "Actually," I said, standing up and pulling out my folder of evidence, "I've been having a very productive few weeks investigating your fake life. Mom, Dad, would you like to see Tyler's arrest record? Or maybe the medical records proving Madison isn't actually pregnant? Or perhaps the financial documents showing how they've been using shell companies to launder money? Stolen from families exactly like ours." Madison's confident expression finally cracked. You can't just make things up and expect people to believe you." "I'm not making anything up." I handed my parents the FBI case file Agent Martinez had prepared for them. "Tyler's real name is Tyler Hoffman. He's been running romance scams targeting wealthy families for 5 years. Madison has been his accomplice for the past 3 years, using her clean background to help establish credibility with victims. Tyler was already edging toward the door, but I'd anticipated this. "Tyler, I wouldn't recommend running. FBI agents are positioned outside, and they're waiting for you to confirm your identity before making arrests." My parents were frantically reading through the documents, their faces showing horror and disbelief in equal measure. My mother looked up at Madison with tears in her eyes. "Madison, please tell me this isn't true. Please tell me you haven't been lying to us about everything." Instead of denying it, Madison's mask finally slipped completely. "You don't understand. You raised me to be successful, to be better than everyone else, to never settle for ordinary. Do you know how humiliating it was to watch other people have things I deserved? To see families with less talent and intelligence than ours living better lives? So you became a criminal?" my father asked, his voice barely above a phoned whisper. "I became someone who takes what should have been mine anyway," Madison snapped. "And Savannah was going to ruin everything with her questions and her pathetic attempts to be part of this family. She doesn't deserve what we've built here." "What you've built?" I laughed. "Madison, you've built nothing but lies. While you were stealing money and manipulating our parents, I was actually building a real business and achieving real success. I pulled out the contracts I'd been saving." "Mom, Dad, remember how Madison said this Thanksgiving was for winners only? Well, let me tell you about some real winning. I just signed a $300,000 contract with Morrison Industries to redesign their entire brand identity with the potential for over $1 million in additional work. I'm also being featured in a book about innovative American designers, which comes with a significant publishing advance." My parents stared at the contracts in shock. All this time, while they'd been dismissing my work as a little art hobby, I'd been building something substantial and meaningful. But you never told us, my mother whispered. Because every time I tried to share good news, Madison would interrupt with something bigger and better. I learned to stay quiet because I thought that's what family harmony required. I didn't realize she was systematically undermining me as part of a criminal conspiracy. Madison was now completely unhinged. This is ridiculous. You're nobody. You live in a tiny apartment and drive a 10-year-old car. You don't get to suddenly pretend you're successful just because some local company threw you a contract. Morrison Industries isn't a local company, Madison. They're a Fortune 500 corporation. And unlike your fake success, mine is built on actual talent and hard work, not theft and manipulation. Tyler finally found his voice. Madison, we need to leave, now. You're not going anywhere, Agent Martinez announced, entering through the front door with 2 other FBI agents. Tyler Hoffman and Madison Pierce, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit fraud, money laundering, identity theft, and multiple counts of financial crimes across state lines. As the handcuffs were placed on Madison, she looked at our parents with pure venom. This is all her fault. Savannah was always jealous of me, always trying to tear down what I'd accomplished. She destroyed our family because she couldn't handle being the failure. No, Madison, I said quietly. You destroyed this family the moment you decided that love and respect were things to be earned through lies instead of given freely through honesty. You excluded me from Thanksgiving because you thought I wasn't successful enough, but it turns out you were never successful at all. You were just a common criminal who manipulated people who loved you. After Madison and Tyler were taken away, my parents and I sat in their living room surrounded by evidence files and legal documents. The silence was heavy with years of misunderstanding and manipulation finally coming to light. Savannah, my father, said finally, we owe you an apology that we can never adequately express. We allowed ourselves to be manipulated into believing things about you that were never true. Madison was very convincing, my mother added, tears streaming down her face. She made us believe that you were struggling, that you were unstable, that including you in family events might be harmful to everyone. We thought we were protecting the family, but we were actually destroying it. The worst part, my father continued, is that we stopped seeing who you really are. We stopped recognizing your achievements, your character, your value as our daughter. We became so focused on Madison's performance of success that we forgot what real success looks like. We spent the rest of Thanksgiving afternoon rebuilding our understanding of each other. I showed them my portfolio, explained my business model, and shared my real plans for the future. They told me about the doubts they'd been having about Madison's stories, the questions they'd been afraid to ask, and the guilt they'd been feeling about excluding me. I need you to know, I told them, that even when you excluded me, even when you believed her lies about me, I never stopped loving you. I never stopped wanting to be part of this family. But I also need you to understand that rebuilding trust is going to take time. 3 months later, Madison and Tyler were convicted on multiple federal charges. Madison received 8 years in federal prison, while Tyler got 12 years as a repeat offender. The families they defrauded received restitution from seized assets, though many never recovered the full amounts they'd lost. My parents and I have been rebuilding our relationship slowly but steadily. They've become my biggest supporters, celebrating every business milestone and treating my achievements with the respect and pride I'd always craved. They've also been actively working to understand how they allowed themselves to become so manipulated, attending family therapy sessions to ensure nothing like this happens again. My business has continued to grow beyond my wildest expectations. The Morrison Industries contract led to 3 additional major clients, and the book featuring my work is being published next month. I've been able to move into a beautiful new studio space and hire 2 employees to help manage the increasing workload. But the most important victory isn't financial or professional. It's the restoration of authentic family relationships based on truth instead of performance. This Thanksgiving, my parents and I celebrated together in their dining room with genuine gratitude for second chances and real accomplishments worth celebrating. Madison wanted Thanksgiving to be for winners only, and in the end, that's exactly what happened, but she never understood what real winning looks like. It's not about impressing people with fake achievements or manipulating others to get what you want. Real winning is about building something meaningful through honest work, maintaining relationships through authentic connection, and having the courage to stand up for truth even when it's difficult. Looking back, I realized that being excluded from that Thanksgiving dinner was actually the greatest gift Madison ever gave me. It forced me to see our family dynamics clearly, investigate the truth behind her perfect facade, and ultimately save my parents from losing everything to her criminal schemes. Sometimes, karma doesn't just come back around. Sometimes, it arrives with FBI agents and federal arrest warrants. And sometimes, the biggest loser in the family turns out to be the one who saves everyone else. Has your family ever had someone who seemed perfect on the surface but was hiding dark secrets? Have you ever had to choose between keeping peace and exposing uncomfortable truths? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. Family dynamics can be incredibly complex, and sometimes the most loving thing you can do is refuse to enable someone's harmful behavior. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more real-life stories about family drama, personal growth, and finding strength in unexpected places. Share this with anyone who might need to hear that sometimes being excluded from toxic situations is actually a blessing in disguise, and that real success is always built on truth, not lies. Thank you all for listening to my story, and I hope it reminds you that integrity and perseverance always win in the end, even when it takes longer than we'd like. Here's to families built on authentic love instead of conditional approval, and to the courage it takes to demand the truth, even when lies are more comfortable. Remember, you don't need anyone's permission to be worthy of love and respect, especially not from people who are trying to manipulate you. Trust your instincts, investigate inconsistencies, and never let anyone convince you that you're not enough just as you are.